start the buttermilk cake, it's actually really simple. This is one of my aunt's favorite recipes, and this actually was one of the cakes that we served at my wedding. It's so delicious. It's also really dense and rich, which means it's actually good as a layer cake because it's sturdy. It's not going anywhere. So to start, I have 3 cups of all-purpose flour. I have 4 eggs. 8 ounces of unsalted butter softened, and it's important that it's unsalted because I'm going to be adding salt into this, and you want to make sure you can control the saltiness of the cake. I then have a teaspoon of lemon zest. You don't need to do the lemon zest, but I really like the flavor of it. It adds a nice little kick to the cake. A tablespoon of vanilla extract for a lot of vanilla flavor. A tablespoon of baking powder. A cup of white sugar, and then a cup of buttermilk. So this is the key here. If you don't have buttermilk, you can easily just add a tablespoon of lemon juice to a cup of whole milk, mix it together until it curdles and use that, or you can do half regular milk and half sour cream and mix it together. So lots of easy tricks if you don't have buttermilk handy at the moment. So first I'm going to combine my dry ingredients. So I have my 3 cups of flour. I'm going to add a nice big pinch of salt. The salt's actually really important in baking because it just gives it an edge. If you were doing this and there wasn't any salt to it, there'd be something missing. All you would have is just a layer of sweet, so the salt is absolutely necessary. Then I'm gonna add my tablespoon of baking powder. And so the reason why I'm mixing this all together at first, rather than just adding it while I'm mixing it in the mixer, is because I wanna make sure I have everything really well integrated. The last thing you want is like a pocket of baking soda in someone's slice of cake. But going even a step further, you just want to make sure the baking soda is really doing its job well. And in order for it to do that, it needs to be really evenly distributed. And this is a classic 3-step method. So it's pretty simple. I'm just putting together all of my dry ingredients. I then have my wet ingredients. But how I'm starting this is by adding my fats and sugar. And this is going to be what everything sort of clings to. So by mixing together the butter and the sugar, what it's going to do is it creates this really smooth, luscious batter. That looks beautiful. So next I'm going to start cracking in my eggs. And you want to do the eggs one at a time just so that it has time to really fully integrate into the batter. And it's the same idea as with the dry ingredients. You want to make sure that everything gets really well mixed, but without having to over mix it. And that just means that everything's going to really work at its absolute best. So to crack an egg, a lot of times people actually crack it on the edge of a bowl like this. I actually crack my eggs on a flat surface like this. And the reason why I do that is because if you crack on an edge, what happens is the shell kind of does this. And so that means it's really easy for you to get shell in whatever it is you're adding to, the batter or what have you. So if you do it on a flat surface, it just kind of compresses it, and then it makes it a lot easier just to crack it open and you don't get any shell in your batter. All right, so one at a time. Perfect. So now it comes to the part where I'm alternating between my wet and my dry ingredients. So I'm going to mix together my wet ingredients. So the vanilla is going into the buttermilk, and then the zest is considered a wet ingredient, so I'm going to add that as well. So I'm going to first start with adding my dry ingredients, and then I'm just going to go back and forth with the wet until it's all done. So I'm just adding, I'd say about like 3/4 of a cup at a time. I really don't want to overwhelm the batter. And so when you hear things like don't overwhelm the batter, don't overmix, basically what you're looking for is you just don't want to activate the gluten that's in the flour. So I'm sure you guys have heard the phrase gluten-free. What is gluten? Gluten is a protein that is found in wheat. And basically what it does is it creates this. It creates structure. So that's why when you bite into a delicious baguette, it's super chewy. That's the gluten doing its thing. However, in a cake, you don't want a chewy cake, so you don't want the gluten to be that active. So you want to be gentle with the flour so it doesn't get chewy and dense and unpleasant. So that's what you're trying to avoid when you're mixing. You don't want to overmix. So the way to make sure you don't overmix is you add a little at a time and you mix it just until you don't see any more dry ingredients. That's when you know it's fully absorbed. So I have my oven set to 350. And I have 2 cake pans that are lined and greased. So the lining is basically, it's parchment paper that I cut out into a circle, and it's a little insurance policy. So by cutting out the parchment, basically what this means is that this cake is coming out of this pan. Like, it just will. So if you ever get stressed out about the idea of whether or not your cake is actually gonna come out of the cake pan, just line it with parchment paper, grease it like you normally would, and the cake will come right out. It really is a lifesaver. So I want to fill these up so they're about the same amount. So I'm just going to spread this out, and I'm going to eyeball it. If I wanted to be more precise, I could actually weigh the cake pans and make sure they have the exact same amount of batter in them. So these are gonna go in the oven at 350 for, I'd say, about 25 minutes. That's usually where they're the best. What's funny about these cakes is that the tops will actually not get particularly dark, but the sides and edges really, really do. So the best way to go about this is to put them in the middle of the oven, bake them for about 20 minutes, and then test them with a toothpick to make sure they're completely done.